Learn Persian with Chai and Conversation. Growing Up Neem-rooni interview with Jasmin Mozaffari. Jasmin Mozaffari, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Layla John. I'm so excited here. I've been such a fan of Chai and Conversation for years. So,
Oh, that's so nice. Well, first, how do you usually pronounce your name, your last name when you're doing interviews and things?
it's the Western way. I grew up just saying Jasmin Mozaffari, which is not
Okay.
really the proper way to say it, but that's
Yeah, it's funny. Like the sounds are not different. Like there is the ah sound in English. It's strange that we have to like change it to an ah sound. I don't know why all the names are like
Mhm.
that.
I know exactly. And I guess like I think my father just wanted us to fit in so much, so that he never was like pronounce it right. So,
Right. And his name was Bobak, right?
yeah.
So then how would he pronounce that, or what was his name when he was introducing himself?
He called himself Bob. He introduced
Okay.
himself as Bob to make people more, because I grew up in a place called Barrie, which is
Mhm.
outside of Toronto. It's like an hour north, and that place is very conservative, very white. There's like no Middle Eastern people at all. Especially I grew up in like the early 2000s, like very post 9/11 was my coming of age.
Mm,
So that time especially was not the time to be, I don't know, my dad just wanted to blend in, and nobody could say his name either, like nobody.
right.
I don't even I think it's not so much that they couldn't say it, it's because they didn't want to try.
Right, absolutely. But again, to go back, introducing you. So I recently watched you create a short film, fantastic film called Motherland. It's on Vimeo right now. So everybody, I urge you to just pause this interview and go watch it. It's only, what, 24 minutes, 27 minutes long?
24, yeah.
Okay, 24 minutes long. So go watch it. And we'll try not to have a lot of spoilers, but it does, like all short films, every minute in that film counts, it's saying a lot, and every expression, every sentence really means a lot. But
Mm,
can you tell us a bit about the film? Just introduce it and
yeah.
why people should watch it.
Yeah, so it's called Motherland. It's 24 minutes. It's about a man, an Iranian immigrant named Babak, who comes from Iran, and in the film, he's meeting his American fiance's parents for the first time during American Thanksgiving, but it's also in 1979 during the Iran hostage crisis. So he's meeting the parents during the height of the Iran hostage crisis in Iowa. It's based off of my father's experience in the US during the Iran hostage crisis. My dad came over late 70s, and he was about 19 or 20 when that happened.
Mm,
So he actually met my mom in Canada, not in the US, but I staged it in the US because I thought there's a little bit more stakes there. And my father was in Massachusetts during the hostage crisis, and it was dangerous for him. He faced a lot of threats, and eventually he left, um partly because of the racism he faced. He
wow.
left for Canada, and that's where he had me and everything. So, yeah, very much based on the story of my parents, especially my dad, Bobak.
Wow. And it says a lot in this short period of time that the film goes on, and it shows the beginning scene as kind of him being chased through a campus, and a lot of uh, I think a lot of our parents' generation really did experience this. So, what would your father say about this time to you? Like, what sparked this time period as something that you wanted to talk about in your film?
Well, it's interesting because my father isn't actually around anymore. He passed away in 2013. So
Yeah,
it's
I'm
not like I
sorry.
could talk to him about it per se, but he mentioned, he would like mention things here and there. I feel like my father's generation of Iranian immigrants, at least from my point of view, kept a lot of things to themselves. Like, you'd hear things through like in passing through little anecdotal stories. So I feel like he would say, "Oh, I was in Massachusetts and we were like running around Massachusetts chasing Italian girls for the first time, and we were like they were just trying to live that American dream that they had maybe when they were in Tehran had watched John Travolta movies, and it was right before the revolution where Tehran was like this bustling metropolis. So that's where my dad came from. He was wearing bell
Mm-hmm.
bottoms. He had this like swagger about him, I think, from what my mom, I had to lean on my mom really to tell me everything. And also
Right.
my Iranian family, his brothers. But for him during that time, from what I've heard from his brothers, he was kind of like in a weird, dangerous place on campus. Like a lot of, he actually got into like a bar fight with a bunch of American men who ganged up on him, which I didn't even, put in the film. But as I researched this, and actually the University of Texas Archives has an amazing um, video record of what happened on campuses, especially in Texas, actually, for the Iranian students there. And it was pretty hostile for them on campus. Yeah, so it was some of the archival footage that I have at the beginning of the film is from the University of Texas Archives.
Wow,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. So just a mile down the road from me.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
and they have like it's not even something you can really just go on you there are clips on YouTube, but I really wanted to see what it was like for these students on campus. And
Yeah.
those records are kept kind of hidden and you have to kind of pay they're behind paywalls and stuff like that. So
Wow.
um and the New York Times has archives, the Washington Post has archives, and once you start digging you realize, oh, it was hard for a lot of Iranian students. Like
Yeah.
really
That's
hard.
so interesting. And I talked to a professor here. I did a project about Persepolis, and he was like, "Oh, Iran, like I remember." He was like, "I was studying at the university in the 70s, and I remember all these good-looking men, just good-looking men came down and like they were all here." So I think it was like that in the 70s, like you were saying, they came from this bustling metropolis. They were well dressed. They were, they come to these like little little towns and little colleges. They were exotic looking, and for a while like Iranians were really revered, and then all of a sudden things turned around. So I think that's an
Exactly.
interesting part of it as well. They like went from being like looked up to suddenly being the pariahs.
Yeah, and I wanted to really highlight the moment where everything changed
Yeah, that's
for
wild.
Iran because it felt like it was just this moment. And also it was this time in American history that was post-Vietnam War. The country was quite divided. And then there was this like I think Nightline was invented because of the Iranian the hostage
Oh,
crisis.
right, right. Yeah, the every night they'd have like a report. Yes.
Exactly. So this was the first time there was this like constant tuning in of a crisis for Americans to watch. And who was on the TV? It was these guys with beards burning the American flag. And then all of a sudden they're looking at the campus and being like, hold on, you look like that guy. You should go back to your country, get the hell out of
Right.
the US.
And
So
a big thing that you highlight in the film too that I just loved that we cannot even fathom is how hard it was to get in touch with family members in Iran. That I mean, I we have stories. My family all came to Dallas, Texas, and they have stories about how I mean it was so expensive to call. First of all, so you didn't just call anytime you wanted. They have a story where some payphone was hacked so that you could call any number. So that you'd have to like drive out an hour, and there was this like one payphone that they could call to Iran sometimes and just like talk. That that was, and so then it was like free, but otherwise they had to pay many cents per minute to call. So you had to kind of get all your things that you wanted out as quickly as you could. Bob back in your film has an experience where he calls and he can't hear. So it wasn't this like constant communication. So that's so scary to me. Like you just send your kid off to another continent and then you don't hear from them. They're just on their own, and then your like country is falling apart at the same time.
yes, yeah, yeah.
What a thing.
My mom on Mazorg would send my father letters, and um she had three sons, and he was the only son that left like right away. Like as soon as he was like 20, he's like, I'm leaving. So I think for her it was like, and she also was like a single mom. Like my grandfather was actually killed in Iran. So
Wow.
she had there's all this baggage, and I kind of put that into the film, like you hear her on the other end of the phone, and I really modeled that off of her, that worry in her voice constantly,
Oh,
you know, like,
yeah.
um, like things you need, like, you should go to Canada, you should leave, things are bad. Like that was just taken from her. And she really
Wow.
passed down that worry, to my father, that sort of paranoia, and down to me. It really, it's an
Yeah,
generational,
of course.
trauma trap.
But who could blame them? Like
Yeah,
all this stuff, like when you read about it, it's like, how did we even get to where we are right now? It's a miracle.
true.
But then what about from your mom's perspective? Can you talk about what you heard from your mom's perspective?
Yeah, I think like you said, she she grew up in Canada in a very, very small farm town. I think in a province called Alberta, which I would say is very similar to North Dakota, like just to put it in perspective for Americans. But she grew up in a town with probably like 1,300 people, and then went to this university that was in a small city. And that's where she saw my dad. And it was like, oh my God, who's this guy? Look at him. She'd never seen anybody like that in her life. And um, they got together, and then obviously when the hostage crisis happened, they actually she hadn't met him yet, but like there was in the 80s when she was with him, there was that stink on Iranians still. And my grandfather on that side, like her father, didn't speak to her for 2 years when he was like, "Oh, you want to marry an Iranian? We're done for a while." So, and that's like from Canadians too. So, it was tough for her to integrate him into the family. It was tough for him to integrate. And but in that time she learned a lot about Iranian culture from him. There was this like group of Iranians at the university, and my father was a part of like whatever the Iranian Student Association was. And that she sort of started to learn about the culture that way and really appreciated it. But um it's funny because I don't think she thought about the race. Like I think my father was, it's not like now where we talk a lot about stuff. I think that she only thought about it later, and I think I put that into her character where there's this naivete about what her partner's going through. Um
Right.
and also this naivete for like everything will be fine. We'll just get married, it's fine. And Bobak, you can tell for him it's not going to be fine. So I think that I wanted to really highlight also, that there's that love there, but there's this like naiveness between them of like, who cares about politics? We can just do it, but it's not that easy.
Yeah. So what happened with your grandfather? Like how did they start talking and what's your relationship with him now?
Well, um it's interesting because my mom like brought, I guess once they got engaged, or I don't know, maybe when they were just dating, my mom started bringing my dad to this small town in Alberta where she grew up, and like taking him on the tour to meet her family. We're all very farmer, like, and there's funny pictures of like this like Iranian brown guy, and then surrounded by like these like very rural, um but they actually ended up really liking him because I think, like in the film, Bobak is eager to fit in.
Yep.
My name's Bob, just call me Bob. Like, you
Uh-huh.
know, I speak English well, which was a benefit to him. So, like, he had a bit of an accent, but I think he could just blend in a little bit better. And they all really loved him. And then once my mom's sister actually, uh, who's younger than her, was said to my grandfather, you need to get over this. You need to let this go, and we need to just invite him into the home. And I have a picture actually from when my dad first came into the home, and he looks so fun out of place. But after that, they became, you know, actually like father and son, because my dad didn't have a father growing up. He lost his father very young. Um, and then my grandfather, who's also of German heritage, didn't have sons. He only had daughters. So it was like it actually felt like they were meant to be. And my grandfather is long like passed now because
Mm.
he's was quite old, but they loved each other in the end.
Wow. Interesting. And what was your relationship like with your grandfather? Like
Good.
was it
He was
okay?
so, I think also once my parents had kids, he really got over any sort of racism. I think that was like, okay, I was my grandfather's first grandchild too, so I think he was that then it was like we became this sort of new Canadian Western, what a new family looks like, and so many families look like
Yeah.
now with
Right.
this blended culture.
Right. Well, so you're Neem-rooni is what we call them on the program. So you're half Iranian, half Canadian. And what was your like cultural identity growing up? Because you're saying that your father was really assimilating. He was really, but then your mom was really interested in Iranian culture. And I
Yeah.
find that in our program that happens so often, or with friends that I have, especially with like a white mom and an Iranian husband. It's like the woman is kind of the bearer of the culture and the cultural traditions. And a lot of times the dad's like, it doesn't matter if they learn Persian. But then the mom is like, they need to learn Persian. What is Nowruz? What is Shabi Yalda? What is all this stuff? Like, let's do it. So what was your experience with that with your parents?
I think my mom was very into learning the culture, and like my mom and they met at university, the University of Saskatchewan, which is like, like in a little farm city, and that's where I was born. And
Hmm.
there they actually, I think because of this Iranian Student Association, there was like somebody teaching Farsi classes.
Mm.
This was in the 80s. So
Yeah.
it was a different, if my mom had Chime Conversation podcast, she'd probably listen to it every day, you know what I mean? But
Right.
that didn't exist. So she did try to learn Farsi so she could actually, talk to her mother-in-law, my grandmother, who now knows English much better, but back then they was hard to communicate. So I think that's what she learned, the fundamentals of Farsi, like the conversation a little bit, but not enough to sort of enforce Farsi to be learned at home, which was really unfortunate for me because my there's three of us, like three kids, and we never we didn't learn the language. My grandmother, my mom Zorg, actually came and lived to help raise me a bit, and she was teaching me. But then when she left, there was nobody, and my father was very like, we're in Canada now, you're Canadian. um but he also at the same time was very proud of his culture. So we always celebrated Nowruz. We always ate all the food, like my grandmother. I really feel like he would just have my Mama Mazorg come and live with us just to make the food.
There.
Yeah, yeah. And I ate wonderful dishes, and also like my cousins from Iran came at a young age. We grew up together.
Ah, wow. Okay. How
So
nice.
I was around it. I heard Farsi my whole life, but I couldn't fully speak it, which is such a painful thing, really for me. Um, Even though I know more now, but I still couldn't like have like a full um, complicated conversation with somebody. Um, and and then growing up in this town where I grew up in, when I was 13 is when like the terrorist attacks happened in 9/11. So I was like, after that, it was just like I remember my father saying to me, he was driving us in the car and he looked at me in the rear view mirror and he said, just out of the blue, he said, Jassy, just don't tell anybody you're Iranian. Just say maybe, he was trying to find the better word, like Middle Eastern, just say Middle Eastern, because he was just, I think he'd gone through the hostage crisis, and he's like, he had this worry of like, we're in this town, there's not many Iranians in this town, and I'm worried that you'll face some things, and I definitely did in like a microaggressive sort of way for sure. So that also made me feel ashamed of who I was a little bit. And then when I got older, like in my late 20s and into my 30s, I was like ready to reclaim, like ready to be like, this isn't half of who I am. Um, and I've neglected it for many years.
Right, yeah. And I mean, you do all of your siblings like look Iranian? Like you present as Iranian, right?
Yeah, I think we all do. Like we all have,
Okay.
one thing you're gonna get is the eyebrows for sure. And I also like had a very um and I feel like it's important for me to talk about this, but like I also like was born with a very Iranian nose. And when I was young, I got made fun of a lot for that. And then when I was 18, I begged my dad to help me get a nose job, and I did.
Oh, you
So
did?
I
Okay,
did.
wow.
But I still have they didn't take everything away, but
You have a
I
beautiful
feel
nose.
yeah, I feel that that erased part of my identity as well, and and when I was that age, I was like, "Ooh, I don't wanna look." There was a shame over, like, looking Middle Eastern too, and, I think it's, like, a conversation that's coming more into focus now, but I'm like, all these things we did to make ourselves look more Western or white or whatever, so, um, yeah, it's like it's been such a complicated identity for me to have, but, I'm so proud of it now, and my before my dad passed, he wrote me a letter actually that I opened after he passed away,
Oh,
and it
wow.
said, "You're Iranian, never forget that, be proud of who you are." So
Oh,
it was
wow.
like, I carried that with me all the time.
Wow. He knew he was gonna pass and he wrote you
Yeah.
a letter?
Yeah,
Oh my goodness. Wow.
yeah, that my mom gave
That's
me after, so it was like, I have that and he was very proud, but he always had this, like, fear because of what he went through, like, in the from the hostage crisis onwards, he was lived in a little bit of fear and tried to really fit in.
that's so interesting. So what was your experience the past few years? Like what the I mean, the Masa Amini and the
Mhm.
women life freedom movement, how has been your experience of that? Has that kind of made you feel anything?
Oh, yeah, for sure. We actually were shooting Motherland during the Women Life
Oh,
Freedom.
wow.
Yeah, and it was very because there's a lot of, Iranian people on set, and we were feeling it really deeply, not that the film has really anything to do with that per se, because it doesn't take place in Iran, but we we were all going to the marches, and Toronto had a humongous, sort of march for Massa and for women life freedom in the fall of 2022. So we
Mhm.
were all going to that and, like, just been, like, following all, like, the leaders in the Iranian community and just, like, I that's when I really was, like I hadn't met Aryan Moyed at that time, but I was following what he was sort of doing in a platform that I'd never seen before Iranians do before in Hollywood.
Right.
So I was like, he eventually came on as a EP to Motherland, but I was like that was when, like, I was like, "Wow, this is reaching beyond just the Iranian community." Um, but yeah, we that affected us greatly, and we were all following it here, and also people from Iran women from Iran were messaging me on Instagram.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so that's another question I have is like how is your relationship with the Iranian community now? Like with the diaspora, with the
It's grown tremendously, and it's, like,
amazing.
always a wish I've always had. I feel like I've come home in a way, I guess, in a way I hadn't felt for most of my life.
Wow.
And that is like, all of a sudden, I feel there's, like, this sense of peace now. It's like, "Oh, I found my people more," and, it's a lot of people in Canada and the US, but also some people from Iran, if they're able to message me, they will especially, like, women being like, "Yeah, I want you to know what's happening here." Not to make a movie out of it, just so I think so I can repost it. Um, and, yeah, I feel very, like, I take that seriously.
That's really cool. I feel like it feels like the woman life freedom movement has been kind of an anti or the opposite of like a 9/11 or something where
Yeah.
those kind of events, everyone kind of went in their shells and maybe tried to like assimilate more and like were quieter. But then this all of a sudden like awakened something in the diaspora where
Yes.
everybody was like, oh my goodness, okay, this is a part of me. Like, I want to be more a part of it. And it made, there's been a lot of issues, obviously, in the Iranian diaspora, and we're continuing to see that. But for a lot of us, I feel like it's brought us closer together and like encourage this kind of art like you're making really makes people feel seen, I feel like your film, all the comments that I see are people being like, wow, this is the story of my family, thank you for making this.
Yeah, it's interesting because people are showing it to their parents or to their extended family, and it's bringing up a lot of emotions for that generation. I think that I think that there's just this sort of sometimes this trend of burying the trauma, right? That's, as you probably are aware of, especially in the community. And I think it's like the younger generation that's starting to like say, "Hey, let's talk about this maybe. Let's actually," because I think like, there's like this feeling, I don't know if it's like part of tarot or whatever it is. It's just like this, like, let's just make everybody feel comfortable. Um, and make Americans, like, we're here, we're in America's an amazing country, Canada's an amazing country, look what it did for me. Let's just be not let's not inflame anything, where I think, and the younger generation's like, "No, let's talk about this." Um,
Yeah.
so for them,
Yeah,
it's like, I
absolutely.
think they feel like they're being seen maybe in a different way, and um it's a lot of memories that they've buried now are coming to the surface, and through watching it, which is really, I couldn't have never imagined that, but it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, so what are you working on now? What's you're deep in Motherland world right now, right? Showing the film
Yeah.
and where can people watch it? How long is it going to be available to watch?
I think it'll be available for another few weeks on
Okay.
Vimeo,
Okay.
until the middle of January. So, and then after that, we'll try to probably get some distribution. I'm
Great.
not sure where yet. We were doing like an Oscar campaign for the longest time, but we were not shortlisted. So that's kind of
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, it
That's
sucks, but
injustice.
yeah, yeah. Well, what came through that was meeting and working with Aryan, and meeting so many people in in the community, especially other Iranian actors and creatives. So, yes, it's online for a few more weeks, and then we'll see what happens. We have a Motherland page on Instagram where all the updates are,
Okay.
and then on my
We'll link to all of that on the show
yeah.
notes, of course.
Yeah, and then I'm working on my second feature, which is,
Oh, wow.
very early in its evolution, but it will also be about Iranian-Americans, but it'll be in a different genre, like a horror genre. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, very excited. And then where do people go to find out what you're doing? Where's the best place to see your updates?
I think on either my Instagram, which is my name, basically if you search my name on Instagram, or
Mhm.
my website, jasminmozaffari.com. That's probably the best way to see what I'm doing.
Cool. Well, I can't wait to see the future of what you do. This was a great indication of what's to come, I think.
Thank you,
And
Layla.
congratulations on all I mean, I'm seeing it all over the place. It seems like it's being very well received and more people should watch it. So go watch it immediately.
Thank you, Layla. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to talk about or mention or that we haven't covered?
No, I think like this was such a wonderful conversation, and thank you for giving people the platform to talk about their upbringing and their Iranian identity. I think it's really, really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jasmine Jen.
Thank you, Layla John.